Hello, everybody, and welcome to ABL Down on the Farm, episode 11, where we talk about all things prospecting, but in particular, prospecting in the ABL, a 30-team dynasty league with a glorious 20 minor league slots per team for 600 prospects in our league. And tonight, I am joined by the owner of the Seattle Mariners, Seth, who's going to talk about prospecting with us. Maybe we'll talk some baseball cards and prospecting, and even some cat talk on this evening's podcast. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Seth. Hey, Seth, how are you?
Hey, Steve. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too. Thanks for joining the show. Appreciate it.
Dude, it's crazy that I guess I had never thought about it, but when you said during the introduction 600 prospects, I thought, is it that many? I was like, oh yeah, 30 teams, 20 prospects per team. I might know 10% of the top 600 prospects in Major League Baseball.
There you go. So we'll talk about that tonight, because I think one of the interesting things about your roster is it's not, laden with top 100, top 200 prospects. And your approach in our league, at least this one that we're in together, is very different than a lot of the other owners in the league. And so I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show. I think it's interesting to hear different perspectives on how to deal with dynasty, particularly a dynasty league like ABL that's so deep and so large. Because you can kind of get lost in those 600 prospects, and maybe you have the secret sauce that you're not getting too far into the weeds on these things like the rest of us, right?
Well, I also appreciate being generous. You saying, well, not very many of the top 100 or 200. I mean, if there's 600 prospects, I don't have very many in the top 570. So I think mine are like all cropped right at the bottom. I think there may be other owners who would argue my prospects are not in the top 600, and I should be picking guys off the waiver wire.
All right, that's fair, and I appreciate the self-awareness. That's good.
Yeah, that whole thing is purposeful for me. So we can get into that some a little bit. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we get a lot to cover. The thing I like to always talk about at the beginning of the show is really just talk about your dynasty background, like when you get started playing dynasty baseball, and how it's evolved over time, and your general kind of thinking about prospects, and maybe that dovetails with your general thinking about dynasty strategy too, right? So how did it all begin for you?
Well, I was lucky enough to start playing fantasy back before the internet was really a thing when I was a kid. And my dad heard about it from like one of his brothers or something. And so we did a family one. Yeah, of course, really small, but like the four of us literally sitting around and picking our players in sort of a snake order, but by position. So we would all pick a starting pitcher, and then we go in reverse order and pick a first base, whatever. And then we would literally wait till the end of the season. There was no trading or anything like that. And in the season, like my dad would tally up all of the stats and have to figure out like team batting averages, regular 5x5 roto. And I think it was like, even then we were playing for money. I think it was like $5 a person. So like, 10 or 12-year-old me had to figure out $5 and chores to do to chip in. And I never won. My mom won like 3 times. She had no idea what she was doing. So I think I learned pretty early on, like, there's a pretty healthy amount of luck going on here,
Right. It's always a little sobering, right? When the person who knows the least wins the league.
Yeah, I mean, it happens like March Madness every year, with office pools and stuff, and but then when the internet, kind of kicked in and people started doing this stuff, like probably 2009 or so, then I started playing online, and I was just fascinated by it. I just absolutely loved it. I tried fantasy football once or twice and didn't get into it, but baseball was like my thing, not only as a sport to watch and play as a kid, but also, just staying up with it as an adult and following it every day and having daily lineup changes for 6 months rather than the weekly lineup changes for 4 months, and the depth, there's all the different positional things that just so much more varied than fantasy football. And I've really enjoyed since I played consistently since 2009, and sometimes in one league just for fun, and sometimes as many as 10 or 12 leagues all for money, which was not good for my mental health.
It's a lot of stress, a lot of keeping up with 12 leagues.
Yes, it is. So that's
Are your leagues mostly dynasty now, or do you mix and match with different formats?
Well, the first dynasty league I played in, well, I guess I should call it, I guess there's debates over the definition of a dynasty league. I played in a keeper league starting about almost 10 years ago. And that was one of the first real keeper leagues I played in, to where people were drafting like hot prospects before they came up, but like maybe just 1 year before they came up, you
Right.
know. And then I got into more of the dynasty type stuff. We had like minor league slots, you know, and like on fan tracks. But this was by far the biggest jump. You know, before that I was doing super well in like what I consider deep leagues, like 15 team leagues, you know, and you do a 15, maybe even a 20 a couple times, and that felt super deep. And it was to the point, you know, to a regular casual baseball fan, when you're in, you know, 2016 and you're like, yeah, Zach Cozart's the backup shortstop for the Cincinnati Reds, and you're living in Seattle, people are just like, who are you? What are
Right.
you talking? You know what I mean? Like, well, I can't even talk about baseball because I'm just a casual Mariners fan who wants to see Robinson Cano succeed after we signed into this huge offseason deal. That's like kind of the extent of my knowledge. And when dude starts talking about backup shortstops for other, you know, so it's almost alienating when you try to have those conversations with other people. So you start
Or
to have this
you know,
online
the fantasy
community.
nerds.
Yeah. Yeah. You like know your online fantasy nerds. You text them, you might email them, you chat with them on the format that you're playing on. But, you know, talking to people in person, you're just like, okay, I got to keep it. So when you go to like social functions, you know, your wife's like, oh, yes, that's into fantasy. And I'm like, or I'm into baseball. I'm like, no. Don't go down that rabbit hole. This is not good.
No, right. They do. My wife does that when she wants to make fun of me.
Yeah.
You know, I often think that like fantasy baseball, and particularly a dynasty league as deep as ABL, is the only context that I can talk about 16-year-old boys and not get in trouble.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes even younger. I mean, seriously, they're tracking, like, weren't they tracking Drew Jones when he was literally like 12 or something like
Oh
that?
yeah, no, the academies start really young. A lot of these teams have deep financial investments and infrastructures in these, you know, Latin American countries, and they're tracking them from when they're, you know, 11, 12 years old and starting to court them, right?
Yeah, that's
Um,
crazy. That's crazy. I
yeah,
get it. I mean, I know you gotta, you know, it's the competitive advantage, whatever you can get, but it's probably good if they keep some kind of standards or rules in there for like how that stuff happens. But yeah, it does get pretty nuts, you know, and that's something I had no idea about before joining ABL.
yeah, it's interesting. So talk about so you get into ABL and it's much deeper than the leagues that you've been in previously. How have you navigated those waters? Because there's obviously a lot of sophisticated owners in the league. People have different styles as well. But you know, what's been your way to success? Because you're having another good year, right? You got 40 win team in the league, and you're in the playoffs. You know, how have you found your way navigating amongst these owners who have probably some of them have much deeper prospect knowledge than you do, right?
Yeah, I kind of noticed that early on, and I sort of coupled that with my usual strategy in keeper leagues was just to compete from year one, because I've watched teams in some of those keeper leagues, and they would draft guys that were well known, you know, prospects that they really wanted to sort of have at cheap levels, you know, especially in, sorry, I got a hair in my face.
That's
They
all right.
wanted to have, you know, a cheap keeper, you know, things for auction drafts. And, you know, I would watch them and, you know, inevitably stuff would not pan out. They would, prospects would get injured or they wouldn't succeed the first couple of years. And then you're like, keeper status is over or whatever. And I would be in the league for like 6 years. And the teams that started off trying to like build for long term, it would never work. Now, granted, these were not guys who were as invested as ABL, but that was always my strategy, to compete from year one and then sustain it as long as I could. And often I would intend to only compete the first 2 or 3 years and then have to rebuild. And then I would find out I could actually compete for 4 or 5 or 6 years before having to rebuild because things just took longer for a lot of these other teams. And so couple that with knowing that, like, hey, all these other owners actually know way more about prospects than I do. I probably should just like do my usual strategy, see how it works. And in the first year, it did work really interestingly because the first year we didn't have any salary cap. Well, you had a cap and you could trade for more cap.
Right.
Um, and so I just kept trading for more and more cap and adding more and more studs to the point that, like, you know, I think at one point I was like the favorite to win the World Series or at least the AL portion. And I did go to the ALCS, and I lost to I think it was Detroit Tigers.
It was, John in the World Series the first year for Detroit.
Yeah. And it's one of those situations. I had more points than him the week before, but then we met up in the ALCS, and he outscored me, and so frustrating. But yeah, so far it's kind of worked. I meant to go the first couple years, all in the first couple years, and now I'm in year 3, and like you said, made the playoffs again. I think I'm going to have the 3rd most points in the AL, but still get knocked out because I'm facing the guy that's going to score the most points in the AL.
It is the nature of head-to-head.
I know. I hate it.
One of the things that I struggle with in a league like ABL, because I'm obviously into prospects and accumulate them. My first year my first full year was year 2, and I ended up trading a bunch of prospects that I like to be competitive for the playoffs. Won the AL East, got into the playoffs, and first week of the playoffs, Max Scherzer, who I had traded for, gets hurt and misses he had a 2-start week, misses both starts, and a couple other things went sideways for me, and I was out. Right, so I traded all these guys I really liked, and I was bounced in the first round. Right, and that is the nature and the risk of head-to-head, competition. You just have one bad week, or the other guy has a really hot week for whatever reason, and that's the way it is, right? So, I've been more circumspect in trading prospects in my second full year, which is year 3 for the league, than I was in the first year, because I was realizing that a lot of other teams like yours and Mark's for Cleveland, and Brendan with Kansas City, were building these juggernauts, in the AL, and what was the path to success to get through? And so for me, I just kind of took the foot off the gas. I was like, I'm not going to be able to, in the head-to-head, really have a good chance of winning against these guys. So I want to get cheaper guys for next year. You've obviously taken a different approach, and you're trying to be very competitive this year, next year. And as a result, I noticed your minor league systems, you only have 14 prospects right now out of an option of 20. Right.
Yeah, a lot of them have come up, and they're up already, and you lose that 2050 status that we designate for people who have no major league stats yet. That's partly because so here's my theory ultimately on this type of prospecting. I put a lot more weight towards guys who are closer, so AA and AAA, than guys who have just been drafted or low A, high A, rookie ball, that kind of stuff. I really think, especially with pitchers, but somewhat with hitters too, I think it's extremely rare that guys that are projected to succeed actually succeed, and it's even more rare that they succeed right away. And they don't get injured or anything like that, or that they succeed right away and don't have something like Wander Franco happening, which is bonkers,
It is bonkers.
So, imagine all the, just a sort of side tangent there, of all the things that can go wrong. It's the same thing in the baseball card community. I collect baseball cards, and we have a baseball card, sort of sub channel on Discord. And some of those guys, Jeff and Sam and Alan and those guys and Adam are involved in it. But, I sold a Wander Franco SSP from 2022, I think, tops for like $560. Not autographed, not serial numbered, no jersey, no relic thing. And it's got to be worthless now,
Right.
And people would be like, well, you should hang on to that. It could go up. I'm like, it's absolutely not ever going to go up. And it's exactly for reasons like that. I couldn't have told you this was going to happen, but it's like dozens of landmines just like that lie in front of every single young player. And do some succeed? Sure. Mike Trout was touted to succeed, and he did, even from the first full rookie year. However, that's got to be like 1 in 10,000 or something,
Right. So, there actually have been some studies on this. I don't know what the odds actually are. I think they're slightly better than 1 in 10,000, but I get your point.
Yeah, right. Even if they're 1 in 1,000, that's too much odds for me. It's or they get injured. Strasburg did really well when he played, but had all the injury concerns.
Sure.
So I've started to. So I don't trust myself with the draft picks. So we have these draft picks, and you've noticed not just my prospects are pretty thin, but my draft picks are pretty thin because for me, it's like not throwing darts at a board blindly. It's like trying to throw a football over the mountains. Like I'm not going to be able to do it, So I just think someone else who's got more confidence than me is going to use this pick much better than I am. So I pretty much move all my picks for other players.
Well, that's interesting. So, you highlight a couple of interesting concepts in Dynasty, right? So the guys who really do know prospects and really do invest in it, you touched on the inherent risk in the strategy of really investing in the prospect community, which is that they are all future bets that have uncertainty and randomness assigned to them, and they can backfire. And for example, you can be right about a prospect being like a really good, talented young ball player, and it's not enough to be right.
Yeah, right.
A lot of things have to happen, to help you along the way and actually realize the value of your investment. And so, for me, acquisition cost becomes important, like how much I paid to get the player, because that hedges the risk. So I'd much rather get a guy off the wire and pay $1 than a first round draft pick or have to trade through the nose for somebody. And so flipping prospects for actual major league talent is a tried and proven method of success in leagues. And there are certainly guys who think that the only value of prospects really is to trade them.
That's close to my theory. That, and like, especially now the roster's expanding, is have guys who are like moving up and down. I've got a bunch of pitchers like that. Randy Vasquez for the Yankees, Ronald Blanco, Brandon Bielak, both of them on the Astros. And so then when the rosters expand, theoretically, they get called up and then they help you in the SP-RP sort of slot situation. But so far, they have not helped me in the playoffs.
Right.
But yeah, that's speaking of pitchers, that is especially true. I think that even your really good pitchers very often take a while to figure it out at the major league level. Like, not only is there the increased risk of injury with Tommy John surgery and thoracic outlet syndrome and all that sort of stuff, but also there's just the sometimes when pitchers really hit it, I think it's much more common for a pitcher to, like Max Scherzer. He is almost unrosterable for his first few years, at least in shallow leagues, regular leagues. And then he hits around 29, 30, and then suddenly becomes dominating. I feel like that's a not uncommon, trend for pitchers. And I just think, who would waste their money on a 22-year-old, 24-year-old prospect pitcher when it could be 6 years before they actually are amazing, and by then you won't have them anymore.
Right. I mean, a couple of historical examples of that are Nolan Ryan and Sandy Koufax, right, who basically, couldn't hit the side of a barn for their first few years, and then became obviously, all-time great pitchers. Not everybody's going to be that good. Not everybody's going to be Max Scherzer, but, pitching is hard.
Yeah.
It turns out it's really hard. Another guy as a good example is Garrett Cole, who was a very highly touted prospect, struggled when he came up, took a trade for him to really put it all together. The Astros kind of adjusted a few things for him, and all of a sudden he was great. Tommy Glavine is another guy who took a couple years to get righted.
And that's something I think there's something with the teams there. I do put a little bit of stock in, I don't have any data to back up which teams do well, but I feel like I occasionally get a gut feeling about the pitching staff or the coaching staff, on a certain major league ball club or developmentally. And you just think, okay, I sort of trust them more than I trust this other team, like the Astros right now versus the Rockies or whomever, if there's a highly touted Rockies prospect pitcher and there's just a random AAA Astros pitcher, I probably will pick up, or trade for the random Astros AAA pitcher, because chances are, in 2 months, he's going to turn out to be actually really good,
Right, right. And the Cleveland Guardians are another team that people latch on to in terms of being able to produce pitching. And
the Rays.
The Rays are another one. And there are the Dodgers are another organization. Pitching. And there have been studies of which organizations do better and why, and but how are you finding prospects? Because how much research are you doing when you find that AAA Astros pitcher? What's your process for identifying guys? Because you're targeting people who aren't on a lot of lists, right?
Yeah.
So how are you figuring out the dudes you want to acquire, whether it be trades or off the wire?
Well, in trades, what's interesting is I I also get a little bit of a bump advantage there because so many people are looking for the opposite thing that I'm looking for.
Mhm.
So I'm looking for like double or triple A guys who are close but not highly touted, because then that way they're not expensive to acquire. And so many other people are looking for like people who are just drafted or are in single A, and then so I if I'm in a trade and I need to throw in or I need to fill a minor league spot to free up, someone coming off the IL on the major league slot. A lot of times I'll look at their thing and I'll as lame as it is, I'll actually look at their age first to be like, okay, this is a 25-year-old hitter. Let's go check him out, And so that's I don't know who Cameron Misner is, but he's 25 years old hitter. Okay, so what does he like? So I click on, has he been doing well? What level is he in? Oh, he's in AAA. Oh, he's been doing pretty well in AAA. What does Fangraphs say about him at the Eric Longenhagen is the guy, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I'll go read his thing, and kind of go, oh, okay. Depending on how recent it is, sometimes his most recent thing is like 2 years old, but
Yep.
I want to get a sense of that before anything. And then if I get a good feeling and it's like, it doesn't cost much to acquire, I'm trading some little minor piece here to free up a spot. Sure, I'll take Cameron Misner as my return on this trade. And I still can't tell you. I can't even tell you what position he plays or what team he's on, but I think he's on my team.
He's on your team.
I think so.
He's on your roster.
So there you go.
But so there was a guy. I had a feeling you were going to say something like that about Cameron and some of the other dudes on your team. So there is a guy I want to ask you about on your team.
Okay.
Who I had never actually heard of before, and his name is Jonathan Perlaza for the Chicago Cubs. And the reason I want to ask you about him is you traded for him.
I did?
Yeah, you traded a draft pick for him at some point, and I wanted to know like what the the synapse was when brought that trade about.
Oh, this is going to be really embarrassing because I actually was it a larger trade or something?
No,
or?
Straight up trade with John and the Detroit Tigers. Like I had never heard of this dude before. I think it was John. I was looking up your trade history because some of these guys. I was like, who are these guys?
Okay, so
one of the students is the other guys. Because I'm like, who are these dudes?
So I did get inquired about Jonathan Perlaza from I don't remember who, but someone hit me up on Discord about trading for him at some point. It didn't work out, obviously, because he's still on my team. But
he's having a decent year in AAA. I looked up his numbers. I was like, oh, he's got double-digit steals and home runs. Okay.
Yeah, and he's got a high walk rate. I'm looking him up now on Fangraphs. High walk rate, low strikeout rate. He's close. Let me see also here. It does have a recent analysis by Eric Longenhagen. I'll hit that whole Control F and then like search for his name and then try to find out what we're finding. Not a lot of they make a lot of contact, not a lot of pop. Might be in the outfield, sort of. Whatever.
Yeah,
but he's close.
A little fringy on defense. Yeah, so it's interesting. I just thought it was really funny that you traded for him. I was just like, what's the story? But
yeah,
maybe he was being offered, and you just said like, here's a draft pick.
I think it was probably also one of those things where I must have been a low draft pick, and there was like I needed a minor leaguer for some reason, like just to fill that slot. And again, you're gearing up for playoffs, so you're kind of like, well, this guy could theoretically get called up, and it would be awesome to get him and have an extra, another outfield slot filled on a Thursday when there's not many games, and maybe he gets you a few points. But yeah, honestly, I can't tell you about most of the guys on my team. But you look, hey, there's very few that are under like 23, so that's
probably have the highest average age minor league system in the league. Like, I think I haven't done an analysis, Seth, but I'm pretty confident that that's true.
You're right. I'm going to have like the all geriatrics minor league system when we get done with this league.
Yeah. Hey, they'll all be major leaguers, right? I mean,
yeah.
So I'm the reverse. I've got a bunch of like 17, 18-year-olds. some of whom may never go to the major leagues or even get to AAA. So we'll see.
Steve, be careful about those 17-year-olds. We already talked about Wander Franco. You got to be careful.
I know. Well, interesting about Wander, we're talking about dynasty strategy. I'm in another dynasty league, and there's a startup draft. This is a few years ago. And I had the 15th overall pick. And I selected Wander Franco and passed on some significant players at 15. do that because he was on the cusp of the major leagues. And he ended up getting called up later that year, as I anticipated. But it was a big bet.
Yeah.
And now I'm screwed.
Yeah, I know, man. Yeah, I mean, for a while it paid off, right? I mean, he did produce when he was up,
and he was having a great year this year.
Yeah,
but
man, that's geez, man, yeah, that's rough. I mean, that okay, so there's always risk with every player, right? I think the strategy overall is just to sort of mitigate the risk, So, I have lots of older guys, even at the major league level. I've got Charlie Blackmon and all these dudes who are in their mid to late 30s, whether they're starting pitchers like Merrill Kelly, or they are bats like Jason Hayward and Travis d'Arnaud and Tommy Pham. But there's risk with those guys too. The thing is, they don't cost much to acquire, and actually, all of those guys were like, I mean, I picked up Hayward for $1 on the waiver wire, like you mentioned, during spring training because he had a hot spring, and I took a gamble, and it worked out fairly well for $1. Kind of same with Pham and Blackmon. I traded for those two guys. They're in first-year contracts, so I can extend them fairly affordably. And it's like, well, they'll help me this year and probably help me next year. That's always the hard thing, is figuring out, both with prospects once they make those major league things and you have to sign them to a contract, and with major league, veterans.
Right.
How long do you go with them? And I was also the outlier there. After the first year, everybody's wondering like who's going to do what. And I think I had by far the most long-term contracts. I signed a bunch of guys like to 2026 contracts.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. ABL you're highlighting the salary cap issues and the contract structure of ABL, which makes it a little unusual for some dynasty formats, in that you really do have to make decisions fairly early on in the prospect's career about how long you're going to commit to them. And given the volatility of prospects, that's actually a more nuanced decision-making process, or at least it should be, than people might initially think.
For sure.
And so we have a free look year. So the first year the guy gets called up, the next year you don't have to make an extension decision, right? So you get him at just a $2 inflation, whatever his value is. Usually it's $1. So you got the guy for $3, but then the next year you got to decide.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, one thing I do like about our setup is that, that's offset by how many years you go down the road. So the part of my logic has been in the past, and I might be editing it, but, going forward. But, say you got a guy for $1 and you sign him for like a max contract, 5 or 6 years or whatever that is. Say after 3 years, he's no longer worth the contract you signed him to, or he gets injured or whatever. At that point, yes, it does cost you its dead weight to drop him, but it's so mitigated. So if you had him, you signed him after that $3 year, say 3 years in, you're at $7 or $9, and you got maybe that year and a couple more years at 11 and 13, but you're only paying 20% of that $13 for that year. So yes, it's dead weight, but it's $3-4 of dead weight, which is not. It's not a team killer, It's annoying, but it doesn't kill you.
No, it's the old expression: aim small, miss small, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, rather than sending a guy at a huge contract where you can really backfire if the dude gets hurt.
And that's what's happened. Actually, I think a lot of people have learned that lesson, whether that was Bryce Harper the 1 year, or Walker Buehler, or Jack Flaherty, or all those kind of guys. Like, I think we're going to see way less of that. I think moving forward, if you're over $30, you're not getting extended for more than like a year or two.
Yeah, probably so. Now, what about your 25-year-old prospects?
Well, that's one of those things where you kind of like go, how do they do, and what do we think they might do, in the near future? So like, a good example is I probably played this all wrong, but I picked up James Outman last year as a free agent on the waiver wire for $1.
And how did you discover him?
He's another guy. He was older, and he was in AAA and mashing, and I needed a minor league slot, and I was like, this dude seems good,
So when you found him, though, how did you search for? You said, I have a minor league slot that I need to go find a guy. So how did you identify Outman?
Now, Outman, I don't remember the process there, but a lot of times once you go on to Fantrax and filter for the minor league available fantasy, you can do a couple of different things. And one that I'll often do is either the rostered percentage or the plus minus, because you'll notice that they have transaction trends to where maybe really active leagues have started picking up someone because they've heard rumblings about getting called up soon, or because they're unexpectedly doing well in the upper levels. And so I'll find some guys like that. I think that's how I found Ronald Blanco, and some pitchers like that.
So
and I mean, a lot of times
the industry is like crowdsourcing.
Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah. And it kind of seems unoriginal maybe, and not like a genius move, but it's sort of like, well, I'm going to spend $1. I got plenty of free agent auction budget. If it doesn't work out, I'll drop them and move on to another hot thing.
I actually think it's kind of ingenious if you're not going to put the time in to really learn prospects and really do the work, and it is a lift right. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work to get to a place where you really feel comfortable making decisions anyway. But if you're not going to do that, I think crowdsourcing is a very kind of reasonable approach. And then once you get to the crowdsourced number, you can obviously look at the numbers yourself, make a decision on your own based on your fantasy baseball experience and knowledge of baseball generally. But identifying prospects, that's a perfectly sound way to do it. And so it sounds like without me, you got a guy who's like got some value.
Well, and then there was like the dumb thing. It was like no one wanted Outman. He crushed at the end of last year, so I felt justified in picking him up, and I was planning on signing him. But then I think before we actually signed contracts, I traded him because I needed a third baseman. So I traded him for Bregman. And actually, it worked out okay in the end. But man, Bregman really sucked for a while this year. And he's on just a 2023 contract, so it's a 1-year deal. And also moved to oh, you know what? Also, I think I moved Kim in that deal. I think I might have sent Ha-Seong Kim. So that sucks. And Outman has turned out not to be
I know. Kim's been great this year.
I know. I'm really pissed that I did that. That was a very dumb move.
Seth. I traded Kim. I had Kim at the end of last year, and I traded him away. So.
Oh, did you trade him to me?
No, I traded him to somebody else who flipped him to you.
And then I flipped him to Phillies, I think. I don't even know if Philly still has him, but yeah. I mean, it's
ABL. Who knows where the players end up? It's
for real, right? Yeah. And honestly, not only the breakout year, but I did not expect second base to be so shallow. So he was my second and third baseman sort of at the time.
Yeah.
And I thought I could get a second baseman in the draft. Someone like Isaac Paredes, who, in a normal league goes for $1 or $2, but in this league went for like $15. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I had allocated like $15 or $20 for a second baseman. I still didn't get anybody that I wanted. So I was like, had nothing at second base to start the season. So it's an up and down thing. At first I was regretful because Bregman was terrible and Outman crushed the first couple weeks. And then Outman started sucking as the league caught up and Bregman turned it around. And then Kim started crushing. And so now it's like, whatever. But I mean, that's how it is with prospects, right? You're stoked that they were a high draft pick and then they get injured in their high A year. And then, and then they suddenly figure something out. The pitcher adds a pitch and it's a lot to stay up with. I mean, honestly, this is almost like a part-time job, being active in this league.
It is. And if you want to be active in prospecting, it's like a full-time gig.
I know, right? I mean, I can't believe some of you guys have time for all this. Like I just think like, I know that they work and some of them also have families. Like, is this all they do is the work and the family and the fantasy baseball?
Basically.
So.
Some of us host podcasts.
See, it works it's like the podcast that also like incorporates fantasy baseball. So then it kind of gets lumped into that umbrella, right?
It's all one big happy marriage. Yeah. So, now you mentioned baseball cards, right? And so you're a collector. So is there a deviation between your fantasy baseball prospect approach versus how much you look into the cards to get for the right guys at the minor league levels, or are you like a major league card guy?
Actually, that's another one. I mean, they almost reinforce each other because the same thing happens in the fantasy or in the baseball card community, where like, Drew Jones is probably the most recent example. He's in the newest Bowman set, 2023 Bowman, and people were going nuts buying his base card autographs for several $100s.
Mhm.
You know, and so I grew up in Atlanta, a Braves fan, in the '90s when they were winning
Sure.
all the time. And Andrew Jones is there, great player. I've got plenty of Andrew Jones autograph cards, sometimes numbered low, like numbered to 99 or whatever. Got him for like $15, And now he's not in the Hall of Fame,
Nope, not
which
yet.
is kind of a travesty, right? But isn't that practically a best case scenario for Drew? Like if Drew's as good as his dad, that is like a 99.9 percentile outcome.
Yep.
And if he's that good, if history serves, as some kind of guide, you'll be able to get his autographed cards for like $20 later on. So these are things I just think, I don't know. I can't imagine a realistic scenario where that price goes up. And there's like a zillion scenarios where the $600 card you just bought, you're going to be selling for $20 when you're hard up for cash in like 3 or 4 years.
Right.
But I mean, it's not everybody's thing. I know people even on our Discord who really like to buy into breaks for Bowman, and they get a lot of the brand new dudes, that are years away. And I don't understand it. I do. My like proposition is like very short term. So like, I recently have been buying. I've been collecting Ronald Acuna for quite a while as a Braves fan. But knowing that he'll probably win the MVP this year, or at least he was a favorite for a while, and Mookie Betts has really come on strong. But I started buying more of his, and I have been able to flip lots of his cards. I mean, I like having them as a collector, but if I can buy a card for $4 and sell it for 20 pretty
Sure.
quickly, I think that's a great idea. And I guess that's probably pretty close to my fantasy baseball strategy. To
Right.
sort of take what seems more imminent. I think if the pandemic and the political turmoil have taught us anything, it's that you can't project out more than a few months. I'm hopeful that we all haven't died in a nuclear holocaust 3 months from now, and beyond that, I'm not willing to offer any wages.
So I sense there are going to be some short-term contracts with Mariners.
Or, I can do the long-term contracts and just, know that, well, I won't be here to have to pay the debt, when we get there, because I'll be a dusty old shell of myself from the nuclear blast or the climate change catastrophe.
There's no downside, right? That's right. That's an interesting philosophy. I think it's the first time nuclear holocaust has been mentioned on the podcast. So because I don't collect baseball cards anymore. I used to when I was a kid, but I don't do that anymore. But I do collect autographed baseballs.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me about that, it's similar to what you were describing. This is specific to prospects I'm talking about, is the kind of irrational hype you get over certain prospects, and it pumps up the value of their signed baseballs.
Yeah.
And so Wander Franco is one of those guys, where you buy an autographed baseball, Wander Franco, you were looking at like a couple $100 to get one.
Jeez.
Okay. And even like a guy like Christian Hernandez for the Cubs, when he was 17 years old and signed out of the as a J15 or J2 at the time. It was something like $200 for his card. Okay. And I just his card is ball, signed ball. Couldn't understand it. But meanwhile I've got like a Jordan Walker card, a baseball for $50. So this very strange market, and I haven't quite figured out how prospects are really priced within that market for signed baseballs. And I don't know whether you see the same thing in the baseball card world.
You do, yeah. And it's like that meme, that gif from Family Guy, where like they're in that showroom or whatever, that deal room, and they're like, you could have this boat, or you could have what's in the mystery box. And Lois is like, let's just take the boat. And Peter's like, but wait, the mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat. Like that is exactly how I feel about the prospects. It's like, I didn't know much about assigned baseballs, but like say you can get someone who's good already that you enjoy, like Ozzy Albies or something, for $50. It's like, yeah, but you could have this Ozzy Albies signed ball for $50, or you could have this prospect who could turn into the next Ozzy Albies for $100. Like, I mean,
Right.
I don't understand the strategy. Honestly, I think it mostly appeals. This is why I was in marketing for a while as a business major, and I started realizing like I don't interact with the marketplace like most people do, which is evidenced in this fantasy baseball situation. And it turns out that lots of people do not just impulse buying, but they buy for emotional reasons. And
Right.
so that's a lot of what marketing is appealing to emotions or making you feel cool or included or whatever. And that's never made sense to me. When a marketing teacher is like, everyone feels like they're not influenced by marketing, but it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So let me tell you that you are. And then I talked to her afterwards. And I was like, okay, I pay my rent. No one's sending me ads about paying rent. I buy gas for my car. I don't think I see any ads for gas. You know what I mean? Like none of the things I buy are actually advertised. Like I buy what so and that's I think that has to do with sports as well. Like baseball is actually, that's another thing I like about baseball and fantasy baseball, is it's very it's probably the most objective sport analytically.
Right.
Because it's so isolated, right? So anytime you have, statistically speaking, anytime you have extraneous factors and sort of outside noise that influences things and make things more random and chaotic. But baseball is the one-on-one. Like you have the pitcher and you have the hitter, and you have a little noise from maybe the weather or the umpire or the catcher's pitch framing or whatever. But basically, it's one-to-one, and that's very isolated and very good. Whereas in football,
Right.
everybody could do everything right, but if one lineman doesn't, and the quarterback gets sacked, like it's just all that kind of stuff. And so that's why I really kind of like baseball for that aspect, not just for fantasy baseball, but also for watching it, because then you look at these guys and you say like, I don't have to base this on an emotional response or a feeling of like being ahead of the game or getting the prospect before he was cool to get. Like, I'm just enjoying literally watching Ronald Acuna like pimp out his 30th home run to make to be the first 60 stolen base, 30 home run player. I mean, how cool is that?
Very cool.
Did you see the gif of Freddie Freeman like standing there being like, like
I did not see that, man. That's great.
That's so good. He even like glances at the camera. It's weird. He like no. So the camera's from like right field, shooting past Freddie Freeman to the plate for this shot. So Cunha hits the home run there in Dodger Stadium, flips the bat, and Freeman's face towards home plate, and then he watches the ball out to like left field and like crosses his arms, and then like looks over at the camera, like glances at it as if to be like, "Damn it! Like he used to be my teammate,"
Yeah.
It's so wild, but it's fun. I mean, there is. I will say there's the big differences in baseball cards. Style matters. Fantasy baseball, it doesn't matter. You could be the most vanilla dude. Mike Trout's a great example. Mike Trout's boring. I've never found the appeal of Mike Trout as a player or a sort of a face of baseball, because he's great statistically, but very boring. Ronald Acuna, I get, and that's why people like King Griffey Jr. are so well remembered.
Right.
I mean, he was so cool and fun to look at, and a beautiful swing. Same thing with Jordan. Whenever I have another Jordan, it doesn't matter statistically. Like LeBron James could have won 7 championships. None of that matters. Michael looked cool. Like the tongue out, and the dunking
like
from
Mike.
behind. Exactly. LeBron will never be able to do those things. He's not the same person. He doesn't have that sort of swagger,
In fairness to LeBron, I don't think most people do.
Oh, right. I mean, probably no one will. It was like that once in a lifetime, like, yes, very talented, but also he had those other it elements,
Right.
And that is one difference there. So I think with baseball card collecting, it's interesting because you could be a really great baseball player and still your cards are worthless. Like we look at guys like that all the time. Like I've got guys that I'm just like, this card should be worth something, and it's not worth anything because no one collects this dude,
Right. Yeah, I think it carries over even to from prospects, but also to the professional players as well. In both cards and they signed baseballs. For example, I have a Stan Musial signed baseball that I paid $100 for.
Wow, that's nuts.
Right, and as a Cardinals fan, like he's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, Hall of Famer, like one of the best hitters of all time.
Yeah, but he's not. He doesn't have that sex appeal that some other guys have, right? And so, a guy like Reggie Jackson, his balls go for more.
Really, that's interesting.
Great player, but not Stan Musial.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true, and that's a really good point, man. I mean, Reggie was definitely like a pop culture, like celebrity icon sort of guy,
and a great player. But he's not Stan Musial.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting.
Yeah, and so, from the prospect side, I think a couple, just to bring it back to that for a second. I think you get a lot of hype on certain dudes in the industry, where you get them on a lot of lists, on Fangraphs, for example, and they get pumped up, and people started buying into this kind of pop culture-esque kind of reputation for these guys before they've done anything in the majors.
Yeah.
And then it has this sticky effect where guys, it takes a long time for them to become recognized as maybe not that good. And so guys like, Forrest Whitley comes to mind, who is like really on all these top 100 lists. Everybody kept, and even when he got hurt and people were still like drafting him, still trying to trade for him, and just couldn't give up on that idea that he was going to be this dude. There are countless examples of dudes like that. And it sounds like you're in a position where you're not really going to be infected by any of that because you've kind of blocked all that noise out.
At this point, yeah. I mean, not only blocked it out, I don't think I hear it in the first place. Like, I'm too far out in the woods to actually hear the noise.
There you go.
So that's and it does. There are ways in which that could come back to bite me in the butt. So that's what I'm curious to find out. I'm curious when that's going to catch up with me. And then, at some point, I keep thinking the other shoe's going to drop. Like, I'm going to not have any studs, so I'm going to have a pretty mediocre major league lineup. I'm nothing in the minors, no draft picks. But actually, I thought that would happen by this year. I was debating last offseason whether I would compete this year, and I went for it, and here I am in the playoffs, and still, I said, scoring the third highest points in the AL in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I actually think I might be able to still compete next year and not have to tear it down and rebuild just yet. But the prospects, thing is, I do think that there's something to be said about, if you are developing as a player, then you will learn skill, or some players will learn skills that will make them better in AA, AAA, those levels. And some players won't. And I don't know that we know the players well enough to guess who that will be and who that won't be. Like, maybe if you knew them all personally, that would be different, because you could get a sense of their personalities and their work ethics and things like that, their coachability. But short of that, I don't see how you would ever guess, other than random chance, who's going to be making strides over those 3 or 4 years of development in the minors. So you have to wait and to see who those are. And that's so I'm much more of a wait and see, and then pick up guys who are going to help you, in the next year or two, or who you think might help you in the next year or two. And then I've got Luke and Baker, who came up, and he is not helping me.
No.
And I thought he would. He was crushing AAA. That's the frustrating thing. Sometimes you get guys who they do great in AAA, and then they don't make that transition. I don't know why.
They're called 4A players.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And
let me ask you this question. So, given your strategy, right? You could get to a place where you don't have any minor leaguers to trade away that are like, and you made a joke at the top of the show. Some people might say you don't have the top 600 guy on your right.
Yeah, right.
So it becomes, you have scarcity of assets to deal, right? Do you worry about that, or how do you think you're going to combat that next year? Like, is it worth getting some draft picks to pick some guys you can trade? What's your philosophy on that?
The draft picks, I probably will never, even once I get to a rebuild point, I don't think I'll invest in draft picks. Because I don't trust myself to draft the right guys, but also because even if I did draft the right guys, it would be years until they actually were helping me. One good thing is that you can recycle major league players. So as long as you can fill out a full major league roster of decent guys, that can produce a little bit at affordable prices, you can flip those guys. I was surprised at how many guys I flipped this year. some of them would have helped me, like Adam Duvall and Trey Turner, who are crushing it this week. I had on my team earlier, but they were 2023 guys. I traded them for guys like Charlie Blackmon, who are on first-year contracts for like $8 or whatever, and Marcelo Zuna. Now, those guys are kind of old, but I think not only they help me this year, they'll help me next year.
Right.
And so, theoretically, they'll help me compete. And then if halfway through I find out I'm not really competing, I can trade those guys to people who are competing, hopefully for like double and triple A guys who are maybe more highly touted than what I currently have, which is not hard to do.
The low bar.
Yeah, right. Like maybe it's someone who is in the top 300 prospects,
Right.
And so I think that's what kind of is my my fallback is like, you can just trade your major league guys for guys and hopefully have a fairly quick turnaround.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So I don't know. I think I think I'm like cut off. It's almost like a noise gate or like a high gain filter where like anyone over $30 is probably too expensive because there's inherent risk. And any minor leaguer that's too far away or comes at any significant cost is probably too much of a risk. So you either, in my opinion, you want guys who are either close in minor leagues or in the major leagues who are not that expensive that, they may not get you 4 points a game, but maybe they get you 2.8 and they're only a $4 player on a first-year contract. Those are the guys, if you can have 30 or 40 of those guys between your minor and major league roster, I feel like you should be able to like kind of keep churning that over and repeating that. That's the theory I'm putting to test, but
I get it.
It's working.
Well, so far so good for you. Now, here's what I'm fascinated to know. Right, I have a segment on the show called Crushes and Fades, and so I'm fascinated to hear who your crushes and fades are, given the focus on 25-year-olds in AAA.
So my crushes, let me look at my roster. Let's see. My crushes are Jonathan Perlaza, who I just found out I have on my team. And Cameron Misner. No, I do think that that there are some guys coming up in the in some of those systems, like the Astros, Braves, Dodgers, Rays, that I see and I like, and it's more team oriented. It's like I like those guys because I trust their player development. And those are probably my crushes right now. And I think they're so good that you're going to see guys like Michael Harris continue to come up who are like, they were on no one's radar, and you pick them up even after they made their debut for $1 because no one owned them in the minor leagues, or Ronel Blanco or whomever, and I do think that's my crushes. My fades are mostly anyone that's too far away that's highly touted now. So Drew Jones is a fade.
That actually makes you very contrary to the industry. So I like that. You're basically anybody who's like younger than 20 and is far away, I'm fading them. So I
honestly, probably younger than 22. If you're not 22 or older yet, I get it. There are there are exceptions to that rule, like Bryce Harper and Mike Trout and Steven Strasburg. But even those guys, say you do get that right. That alone is not enough to carry your team. So if you're trading significant stuff to get that, even in the chance that you're right, you're still wrong. So.
Right. Well, the acquisition cost is important, right, for all these dudes. And so once these prospects hit, they become popular, whether it's at the AA, AAA level or in the majors. The acquisition cost becomes so significant that it's too late, right? And if you acquire somebody cheap, you can actually flip them at that point and get paid a boatload for them, right? So, I'm sure I'll be getting a lot of offers from my boy Yuri Perez at some point. So
there you go. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is the hard cap plays like a big. So that's ABL emulates MLB fairly closely, like way more closely than any other league I've ever been in or heard of. But that hard cap is more like an NFL thing, right? Like there is no hard cap in the MLB, which I love for the sake of the union and the workers. And some teams pay a luxury tax. And actually, I would be interested in like exploring that idea in ABL, but like because of the hard cap currently, you're right. I mean, the acquisition cost becomes the primary, I think, way to judge any players, including minor league players, because yeah, like you said, most of them are a dollar. Some weren't. I mean, I was one of the guys
Right.
that had a $17 whomever, I can't even remember at this point, and it's like ridiculous. There's no way he's going to be worth $17 his rookie year. So no one's going to sign him an extension. Um, but how much you trade to get him, or how much you give up to get that draft pick to draft that player. Those things matter a lot, and I'm surprised sometimes at how much I can get for certain things.
Yeah,
So
sure. Sure.
that's why I've got very few draft picks. But if you want to send me some, I would sure like to have some.
If you look at my roster right now, my 2024 draft picks and 2026 5 draft picks are pretty shallow, pretty
Oh,
slim.
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I traded a lot of them away, but I do have a bunch of like 17 or 18-year-olds who are like better than draft picks because they're like actually in the Major League Baseball already. They're
Oh,
actually
there you go. Yeah, they're on
they're
a
in the
team.
system, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
and they're
yeah,
actually playing.
yeah.
Well, listen, this has been a lot of fun, Seth, and I'm looking forward to grading your farm system as part of the ABL handbook next year.
Oh no, don't do that. It's going to be so. I guarantee I'll be last.
No, but you're going to get a lot of points for proximity because that's what we're doing.
There you go. Okay. It can be summed up in I didn't do any. I don't think I'd made any picks last year. And the year before that, my first pick was like in the 4th round, and I got Robert Perez, who was a 32-year-old reliever who came back from Japan, who actually never played in the majors. And he's been okay. He's been injured some.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like
yeah.
when he came and when he got caught up, I was like, sick. I got him for a 4th round pick. Like, this is great. He's like helping me right now. And I drafted him in the draft pick. So that can sum up my my whole thing right there. And I'm glad you worked in proximity, because maybe then I'll be like 27th instead of 30th.
Well, we'll see where you net out at the end of the day.
Yeah, sure.
But this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and good luck in the balance of your matchup. I've already lost mine, so I know I'm out. But
Yeah.
we'll rally this weekend and can get over the top into the next round.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again, and to everybody watching at home, remember to ABP. Always be prospecting. Take it easy.
See ya.